Welcome to our lesson on the activities of the small and large intestine. This information can be found on page 483 to 487 in your textbook. There are a lot of things that go on in the small intestine. The first thing I want to talk about are the brush border enzymes. The brush border enzymes are what is excreted from the brush border that is on the villi. So on the villi, on each of the villi, you have this little projection coming off the circular folds, and then you also have these little projections called microvilli that come off of the villi. And so there's enzymes that are secreted there. And they're breaking down those double sugars. If you remember, I said those double sugars are maltose molecules. They were broken down from starches that you ate, and that breakdown started with salivary amylase in your mouth. So now that maltose has traveled all the way through your esophagus and your stomach, and now it's coming into your intestines, and the brush border enzymes are going to start to break those down into simple sugars or into monosaccharides or glucose. And brush border enzymes will also complete protein digestion. So now we're also going to get all of those proteins that were started to be broken down into smaller polypeptides are now going to be broken down into their amino acids. So brush border enzymes will break down those two things. There's also intestinal juice that it doesn't have any enzymes in it. That's why I have enzyme poor there, but it does secrete mucus, and that mucus is to coat the small intestine so that the acidic chyme that's coming in from the stomach does not hurt the intestine or the intestinal wall. So that intestinal juice is being secreted for that reason. Now there's also pancreatic juice, which I said it's loaded with enzymes. It has lots and lots of enzymes. I'd mentioned this earlier. The pancreatic juice has pancreatic amylase. This is going to continue to break down starches. Any that were not broken down by the brush border enzymes will get broken down with the pancreatic juice. Also, trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidase. These are going to complete breakdown of proteins. So proteins are going to be broken down with this. So far we've said, okay, sugars and proteins. We also have lipases. Lipases are going to break down the fats. So those are the three big macromolecules that we've talked about in class. Now I didn't talk about nucleic acids. Those are our DNA and our RNA. Because I know you talk about those in biology, so I don't bring them up too much. But nucleases are the enzymes that are going to break down DNA and RNA. I want you to take notice that most of these enzymes have an ASE ending, except for trypsin and chymotrypsin. But all the other ones, if you look at them, have that ending. We talked about that ASE ending earlier in the year. As far as that being an ending for enzymes. Now, lipases are very important because they are the only thing that breaks down fats. So they're totally responsible for complete breakdown of fats. So that's important to know. So that pancreatic juice, loaded with enzymes. We've only talked about a couple enzymes so far, salivary amylase in the mouth, and we talked about pepsin in the stomach. Those are the only two that we've talked about so far. So also in the pancreatic juice, there is something that is going to help neutralize the acidic chyme. So there's a bicarbonate in there as well. So not only the mucus from the intestinal wall, we also have the pancreatic juice that has bicarbonate, or this neutralization factor too, to protect the small intestine. It's a bicarbonate rich juice that is secreted from the pancreas into the duodenum to neutralize the acidic chyme. And it also provides a good environment for the pancreatic enzymes to work because the pH is about 8 of the neutralization juices there. So how does the body know when to release this pancreatic juice? Well, again, there's some nerve stimulus. I'm not going to get into the vagus nerves and all of that. If you take an anatomy class, you'll learn about that. What I'm going to focus on are these two hormones, secretin and CCK, or cholecystokinin. They work together, and I'm going to show you on the next slide how they work together to stimulate the pancreas and the liver to release digestive juices. So both of these hormones are secreted in into the body, and they tell your body you need to start producing the pancreatic juice and also the bile in the liver. And it also tells the gallbladder to start secreting the bile that is stored. Okay, so this picture is in your textbook, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a summary of what's going on here. The first thing that's happening is the chyme is entering the duodenum. Let me change colors here, because that is not a good color. So the chyme is entering the duodenum. As soon as it enters the duodenum, it causes the cells in the duodenal area to secrete CCK and secretin. So those two hormones are released. The CCK are the red dots, the secretin are the blue dots, and they're going to enter into your bloodstream. So you can see that happening right here. And this going all the way around here is it's supposed to mimic your bloodstream. So when these hormones that are released from the enteroendocrine cell reach the pancreas, which is over here, this organ over here, when it reaches the pancreas, the CCK tells the pancreas, hey, you got to send that pancreatic juice into the duodenum because there's some chyme in there and we need to start breaking down those enzymes, or not enzymes, we need to start breaking down those nutrients. The secretin, so CCK is telling the pancreas to send out pancreatic juice. Secretin tells the pancreas to send out the bicarbonate-rich stuff in the pancreatic juice. So secretin and CCK both work on the pancreas to secrete those juices into the duodenum. Number one, the bicarbonate to not, so the chyme does not injure the small intestine. And the other is all of the enzymes that are going to be needed to break down the nutrients that are coming in from the chyme. The secretin also goes into the liver to tell the liver to secrete more bile. So that hormone goes to the liver and says, hey liver, you need to send bile down to the duodenum so that you can start emulsifying the fats. CCK works on the gallbladder. So secretin to the liver, CCK to the gallbladder, and any bile that was stored in the gallbladder is released, and it goes down into the ducts that then secrete into the duodenum. It also relaxes the pancreatic sphincter, so the bile from the liver and also from the gallbladder can be sent into the duodenum. And then you'll see the fifth thing is talking about the vagal nerve fibers causing the release of pancreatic juice and also causing the contractions of the gallbladder. So those two things are happening due to those nerve fibers. And remember, nerve fibers are all coming into all of the organs. There's nerve fibers everywhere in your body. And so it's going to cause those things to contract and to allow the things to be released that need to be released. So that's a quick overview, but this diagram is in your book, and it's a really great diagram for you to look at and take another look at and to see what's going on here, what's being secreted, when, where, why, and how. Now this table is also in your textbook, And it just talks about the different hormones that are helpful in digestion. We talked about gastrin being secreted in the stomach. There's also intestinal gastrin that stimulates gastric secretions and also emptying. And we have histamine also from the stomach, and somatostatin, stomach and duodenum. So really the ones that we've talked about and focused on are the gastrin on this one. The other ones you should read through and be aware of them, but you should definitely be familiar with the gastrin. The other three, once food gets in your stomach, that's when the stimulus for the secretion occurs. So as soon as food starts entering your stomach, all four of these are going to be released and going to act on different areas of the digestive system. And this is just a continuation of that table. We talked about secretin and CCK, and then there's this inhibitory peptide, and this stops the secretion of gastric juices. So that when that hormone is released in the duodenum, it says, okay, we're done digesting now, and it stops that release of gastric juices. But then what it does is it stimulates insulin release as well, because now you've got all that food in your system and all those nutrients that were being absorbed, and so insulin needs to be released at that time into your body. So this is just a continuation of that table that's in your textbook. I highly recommend you look at so you know the sources of these hormones and what their actions are. Now, the biggest activity of the small intestine, not only is it the breakdown of the nutrients with all those enzymes coming in from the pancreas and the bile coming in from the liver, the small intestine does absorb some water, but it's absorbing through the cell membranes into either the capillary beds or the lymphatic system. It's going to be taking all those nutrients in. So all of the monosaccharides, all of the fatty acids, all of the nucleic acids, all of the amino acids, all of those things are going to be absorbed into the capillaries or lymphatics and then transported back to the liver, and then the liver distributes or stores whatever it's supposed to do. The liver takes care of what it's supposed to do with those nutrients. And just a reminder that most of that absorption is taking place in the jejunum, so that middle portion of the small intestine. So the duodenum is where we have all the breakdown. There's villi in the duodenum, there's villi in the jejunum and circular folds. But as we get to the end of the jejunum and into the ileum, that's where those circular folds and villi start to decrease in number. But up in that jejunum, there's going to be lots of circular folds and lots of villi to allow for the most absorption to occur in that area. Now, the large intestine is just kind of moving the things that your body didn't use, moving it to be waste. There's no enzymes that are produced in the large intestine. There's lots of bacteria that are in your in your large intestine that will digest some of those nutrients. But for the most part, most of the nutrients that were absorbed in the small intestine. So there's not going to be that much left for those bacteria to digest. But they also produce vitamin K and some B vitamins. And the bacteria are also what causes gas. It's methane gas and sulfide gas, and that's what gives poop its odor. So water, vitamin K and vitamin Bs are absorbed in the large intestine, and the K and B vitamins are produced by that bacteria in your large intestine. And then other materials are eliminated by feces. So the things that are being eliminated are anything that was not absorbed in the small intestine. Your large intestine dehydrates it and then moves it to the rectum and gets rid of it. So the solid product is delivered and then excreted. Your large intestine usually takes 12 to 24 hours to get the food, the remaining indigestible material through the large intestine. So it spends a lot of time in the large intestine before it's actually stored in the rectum and then released as feces. And just in case you were wondering, feces is all your undigested food. There's some mucus, any bacteria that comes out with it, and then also any water that wasn't taken out in the large intestine would still be in the feces and would be excreted. So I've drawn a large intestine schematic here because I want to talk about how this residue is propelled through the large intestine. There's two things that occur. We have sluggish peristalsis, sluggish just meaning it's very, very slow. That's why it takes 12 to 24 hours for things to move through your large intestine. Remember, it's trying to get rid of water. Your body will use that water, so it's going to take water out of the material that goes through. And we call these haustral contractions. And if you remember, when we talked about the large intestine, we said each one of these kind of puckers here is a haustra. And so each one of them contracts. And those contractions last about a minute, and they occur about every 30 minutes. So that's why we're saying it's sluggish peristalsis. If you remember watching the video of your esophagus, the peristalsis was happening very, very quickly. That food was moving very fast through the esophagus to get to the stomach. Well, when it gets to the large intestine and it's going through peristalsis or these haustral contractions, it's moving very slow. One contraction that lasts about a minute happening every 30 minutes. Then we have something called mass movements. These are much stronger movements of your large intestine, but they're very, very, very slow movements. They only occur 3 to 4 times a day, and they're also helping propel the residue through the large intestine. So we've got these contractions that are occurring here at each haustra, but then we also have mass movements where it's large areas of large intestine that are pulsating and moving that residue into the next section of the large intestine. And again, those are only happening 3 to 4 times a day. And that's why it takes 12 to 24 hours for things to get through your large intestine. Everything else is happening pretty quickly to get from the mouth to the stomach to the small intestine, and even going through the small intestine doesn't take 12 to 24 hours. It's going pretty quickly through those areas of the digestive system, but here it's taking lots and lots of time. And then the last thing that happens, our last process of or control of the digestive tract is defecation. And we do have a reflex, defecation reflex, that causes the sigmoid colon and the rectum to contract and to want to get rid of that waste. And then we also, at the anus, have 2 sphincters. We have an internal anal sphincter, and we have an external. And the internal anal sphincter is involuntary, so that one is going to contract and relax on its own. Your body tells it when to do that, but we decide when to open and close the external anal sphincter, because that is voluntary. So we decide whether that should remain open or constricted to stop passage. So the 2 sphincters there, one is involuntary and one is voluntary. And we do have that defecation reflex that's pushing or contracting and pushing the feces to get rid of it in the body. And that is it for the small and large intestines and their functions and activities. I hope you found that useful. And there is an assignment. And your assignment, again, to read the textbook, just because it's very helpful just for the terminology and the pictures. 483 to 487 talks about the small and large intestine and its activities. And then there's an activities of the intestine worksheet that you should submit to the Dropbox, and that is on the class page. So I hope that was an enjoyable lesson, and I will talk to you tomorrow.